Whew. It would seem that the American right is completely obsessed with Ilhan Omar and anyone who criticizes Israel at this point. I tend to listen to Ben Shapiro every day so that I get sort of my dose of the conservative perspective. I've always considered him to be kind of one of the more honest guys, on the mainstream right. But I just can't do it anymore, because the last 2 weeks he's spent every day just slamming home the point of how Ilhan Omar is a virulent anti-Semite, practically literally Hitler, for questioning Israeli government policy. And I'm absolutely pissed. I just can't stand this anymore. It's the most intellectually dishonest line of thinking that I've ever heard from someone who I used to, I still do to some extent, consider to be somewhat of a thinking person. It just grosses me out that Shapiro and so many other people on the right use such a dirty argument to try and smear anyone who disagrees with their politics. Because it would seem to them that there is no acceptable level of criticism for the Israeli government. No matter who or why someone criticizes Israel, I've always heard the right call that anti-Semitism. They just say that there are different intensities of anti-Semitism. Now, I understand they think that Ilhan Omar is particularly anti-Semitic, but even other Jews who have very, very mild criticisms of Israel and still consider themselves very pro-Zionist are called anti-Semitic by people like Ben Shapiro and other mainstream conservatives like Glenn Beck or Mark Levin or other people that I've listened to throughout my life. And considering that American conservatives sort of make it their shtick to rightfully call out a lot of the inefficiencies and wrongdoings of the United States government, I find it so strange that they're so reflexively defensive of every action of the Israeli government, even ones that they disagree with, even actions that they disagree with when carried out by the U.S. government. For example, I've never heard an American conservative criticize Israeli gun laws. In Israel, it's very hard to get a gun if you're a civilian, just like in a lot of countries. But I've never heard it called out in Israel, but every criticism I have heard of Israel has, one, never been leveled by a conservative, and two, is always called, blanketed as anti-Semitism by people on the right, and particularly, the mainstream movement conservatives, as they call themselves. In fact, they've turned anti-Semitism into such a cartoonish concept now that it's basically, they've done to anti-Semitism what the left did to racism. How the left just called any one of their enemies who didn't agree with policies like affirmative action or what have you, or criticized Obama, for example. They just called them racist because they thought that was a good way of shutting down debate. Well, the right is doing that with anti-Semitism by calling everyone who criticizes Israel, even very mildly, anti-Semitic. And I think we all remember what happened to the left eventually. When they started calling everyone racist, then nobody became racist. The result of calling everyone racist and making everyone labeled a racist was you ended up getting someone like Donald Trump who just didn't care what you called him because people understood that, well, you're going to call everybody a racist, so why should I care if you're calling him a racist, no matter what he said, really. I mean, he could say things that might be considered somewhat insensitive, but people didn't really care because the left is going to call him racist anyway, so what does it matter? And so in doing what the right has, I don't know if Ilhan Omar really does have somewhat of a dislike of Jews. I don't know. I don't know her personally. She very well might. But if she did, I would have no way of distinguishing her from any other reasonable person who criticizes Israel. I'm sure if I had a nice, reasonable, calm conversation with Ben Shapiro, he would shout at me and call me an anti-Semite. And Israel's not a big issue to me. I don't really care about it. I don't live in Israel. But I don't like being told that I'm not allowed to have a certain opinion. I don't like being accused of wrongthink. Frankly, I'm disgusted by anyone who would tell me that I have to pledge loyalty to the government that does occupy my country, the United States. I reserve my right to criticize them on anything because I'm an individual human being and I'm not accountable for their actions. But I sure as hell take great offense to having to pledge loyalty to a country which doesn't even occupy or to a state which does not even occupy my country. I have absolutely zero relation to Israel. I've never been there. I don't know anyone I think I know people who've been there, but I don't know any Israeli citizens. I have no Israeli relatives. I have no connection to that country, so why should I give a damn about them? I've never been asked to pledge allegiance to the Queen of Great Britain or to, the President of France. Why should I pledge allegiance to Bibi Netanyahu? Frankly, it's greatly insulting to me that members of the Israeli government would try and hide behind the label of anti-Semitism to smear all of their critics, because what they end up doing then is lumping in all Jews with the Israeli government, and therefore making all Jews responsible for the actions of the Israeli government, which I think actually increases anti-Semitism. If you're saying that anyone who criticizes Israel is criticizing all Jews, well, then you are implicitly associating all Jews with your actions. So therefore, you're going to promote blowback against Jews for actions of the Israeli government. So perhaps you should be a little more careful with your language. I think it's very important. I certainly try always to distinguish between the Israeli government and all Jews, because all Jews have very little relation to one another other than perhaps a common ancestry or religion. But frankly, there's Jews in every country in the world, and they're all very different. Israel is one country with a government run by a rather small group of people, and so it's a pretty specific group to criticize. And it's preposterous to try and link that small group with the whole of the Jewish population of the planet. Anyway, if you've made it this far, please do like this video and consider subscribing. Anyway, I'll see you folks tomorrow.